Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us at this World Wildlife Fund Forest and Climate Initiative online learning session. My name is Breen Burns, and my colleague Maria Jose Pacha and I will be your facilitators. Our topic today is Payment for Ecosystem Services and REDD+, and our speakers are Pablo Gutman, Senior Director, Environmental Economics, and Josefina Braña, Policy Lead for the Forest and Climate Initiative. Both Pablo and Josefina are based at the WWF-US offices in Washington, D.C. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly go over a few basics. First, please make sure your microphone, which is the green icon next to your name, is muted to help reduce background noise. Second, please use and watch your chat window. You can use this feature during the presentation to contact us if you're having any technical difficulties. And finally, please submit your questions through the question panel on your screen, and we will read them aloud to our presenters during the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Thank you again for joining us, and with that, I will turn it over to our speakers for introductions and to begin.
Hello, everybody. This is Josefina Braña. I have a background in public policy and international negotiations. And as Green was telling you, I am currently the REDD+ Policy Director under the Forest and Climate Initiative of WWF.
Okay, hello there. My name is Pablo Gutman. I'm an Argentinian being in the state for some time now. My background is in economics and development, and I have been doing work on the interface between environmental issues and economic issues for the last 30 years in many countries around the world. The last 12 of them with WWF-US policy shop, and actually beginning 12 years ago to work on payment for ecosystem services when this issue began. So thank you for joining us, and without further ado, you have there the topics we want to go over in this hour, share with you. We will try to give you food for thought. This is a very ample issue with a lot of things to dig in, but we hope to have a good introduction and a lively discussion at the end. So you have in front of you the topics. What is PES, some key components of a PES, different business arrangements, different implementation arrangements, a little discussion on what are the pros and cons of PES, and then moving how to use PES in REDD+, and that will be part of what I will be talking with you in the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes max. Then Josefina will present the recent experience of Mexico with PES, where there are really very interesting things happening and many lessons that can be applied to REDD. And after that, we'll have at least 1/3 of the time for discussion and questions and answers. So let's move to the next one. Okay, so this is the broadest framework where we want to have our discussion, and it refers to WWF vision for REDD, and you can read it there. These are our broad principles. We expect and we strive for REDD to make a significant contribution to the conservation of tropical forests, and thereby to the reductions of emissions from deforestation and degradation in a way that not only achieve climate goals but also benefits people and nature's conservation. And we believe that REDD is an important component of a global effort to address climate change, and indispensable if we want to keep global warming below the key threshold of 2 centigrades. And so this is the broad perspective that frames our approach to REDD. Next, please. So what's payments for ecosystem services? Well, there is a lot of different definitions, and we can discuss them if you want, but in a nutshell, PES or PSA in Spanish, it means a type of arrangement through which beneficiaries of ecosystem services pay the providers of those services. You could think, or we could think of the PES as the complement to the polluter pays principle. If you recall, the polluter pays principle means that the parties that damage the environment need to pay for the restoration of the environment, need to pay for the damage they cause. Well, the PES intuitively is the counterpart, is that people who improve the quality of the environment, people who improve the flow of ecosystem services should be rewarded for that activity. Again, the counterpart or the flip of the coin on the payment, the polluter pay principle. Then the question is, why do we need a PES system? Isn't people already being rewarded as producers of ecosystem services as they are rewarded of when they produce whatever, bananas, meats, or you name it? Well, the issue is that the idea of payment for ecosystem services arises from the fact that the marketplace fails to reward providers of ecosystem services when those ecosystem services have the character of public goods. So, for example, the obvious thing is the atmosphere, the air around us. It's a public good. You cannot make the user of the environment pay, so of that public good pay. So the protection of the air quality goes non-retributed, non-rewarded. That's an example. Biodiversity is other. There are many other examples in the environment, and that's why those services are not taken care of by the market. And the idea that payment for ecosystem services mechanism could step in and assure that the people that has rendered those ecosystem services get rewarded from there. Next. So what are the key components of a PES scheme? Well, obviously first is the ecosystem service. Any PES scheme needs to be clear about what ecosystem services it is about. There are lists and definitions of it. One quite famous is the work of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and there's quite a complete list there. But there are many others. And again, the interesting thing is that the PES is specifically applied to those ecosystem services that are public goods, because part of the ecosystem services, or better say, ecosystem goods or services, are what in the Millennium Development Goals are called provisioning services, which is the food and fiber and non-renewable resources that we take from the environment. But usually those go through the market, and at least part of their costs are compensated through the market, while others, particularly the regulation services like climate, water quality, air quality, those kind of ecosystem services are not captured in the marketplace. Then, of course, there needs to be a demand. That means willing buyers of ecosystem services. People, institutions, governments that are willing to pay for the provision of those ecosystem services, either because they're going to use them themselves or because they act on behalf of others, or maybe to resell. I mean, REDD could be some of that. Then the third component is the supply, meaning willing providers of ecosystem service that understand what they need to do to deliver those ecosystem services, are able to do so. And I'll put the emphasis on willing, because thus far PES is seen from the point of view of the suppliers at least as a voluntary thing. You participate if you so want. And then again, that's something that we should keep in mind for application of PES to REDD. Then there needs to be a payment. It's there in the word payment for ecosystem services. Most of the payments in these arrangements are money, but there could be other things. I mean, there could be, for example, like in the huge China Grain for Green program, there was grains and seeds. And finally, there must be a tracking system to assess the production and delivery of the ecosystem services in question, sometimes a proxy of them if the ecosystem service is difficult to quantify, and also a tracking system to track the payment. So these are 5 essential components of PES system. Next, please. So there are many business participants or business arrangements in PES schemes, and probably we'll see it also in REDD. PES scheme can take the form of private markets where private buyers and private sellers agree to a scheme of PES, and there are examples around the world where that exactly is what happens, from water companies to ecotourism agencies that makes private market type arrangement with providers of their ecosystem services they are interested in. They could be a private or public entity that buys ecosystem services on behalf of others. Many water companies, public or private water companies, collect fees in the water bill and use part of those fees to pay for the protection of the watersheds where the water intakes are. And so you have an intermediate there that buys on behalf of others these ecosystem services, and could be public or private. You have full government-driven systems where the government is the buyer of ecosystem services. Josefina will talk of cases on Mexico where the Mexican government is the major or sole buyer of ecosystem services in those cases. And then you could have international schemes, and for example, one could say that the GF, the Global Environmental Facility, is a scheme whereby an international agency, the GF, pays for the provision of some global ecosystem services. And REDD probably will fall maybe in all of them, but it will have components of these 4 possible business arrangements. Next, please. Then other dimension of the business model is how the payments are made. It could be paying for cash for ecosystem services. There are many cases like that, as we say. Costa Rica is the example where the government essentially pay cash to under different arrangements to different kinds of landowners for forest conservation. But payments could be made for the ecosystem service or could be made for a proxy. For example, most of the watershed conservation related payment for ecosystem services actually pay for forest conservation, because there is this assumption that a good forest protects the watershed, but they don't measure, so they measure the forest cover in the watershed and not necessarily the water quality. The payments could be payments by result, payment with the ecosystem service for being delivered, or could be front-loaded. In many cases, in most cases of PES, the payments are done initially to allow the land user, the farmer, the peasant to undertake the activities that will increase the provision of ecosystem services. In a few cases, there are backloaded, meaning payment by results, which is the case a lot on, at least in the talks about phase 3 or REDD, payment by result. Finally, it must be said that in most cases of payment for ecosystem services, there is not a clear price of the ecosystem services. So finding what you should pay, how much you should pay, has been one of the difficult questions. And many of the PES for ecosystem services schemes that are out there use a kind of price finding mechanism that could be estimated opportunity cost, or could be reverse auctions, or could be doing one-of-a-kind deal in each case. And that, again, would be something that may be interesting to remind us when we move from PES to REDD. The next one, please. So how do you go about doing these PES schemes? Well, here's a little table of how most of the cases has been done. To begin with, most of the cases of implemented PES schemes has been the demand-driven, has been the agency or the company who wants to procure these ecosystem services. Most of the cases government, but also private companies who have been going out to put out the scheme. But not in all cases, and we can talk of cases where supply has generated the scheme, but bear with me here. So what are the steps? Well, first, define the location of the ecosystem services, then understand how land management activities would be needed to deliver the ecosystem services, meaning what is needed to be done. Is it to reduce deforestation, increase reforestation, reduce the use of agrochemical? What needs to be done to ensure that the flow of ecosystem services increase? Then the third level is to engage with local landowners and users to test viability, because again, these PES schemes are voluntary. You participate if you want. Then estimate cost to land users, design payment schemes, then invite the local landowners or users to voluntarily participate, and finally implement technical support systems to facilitate participation. That's important, particularly with local communities and poorer dwellers. And then establishing monitoring and payment mechanisms. This slide could be seen like the checklist of things that need to be done to put in place a working PES. Next one, please. So what are the pros and cons of a PES scheme? And here we see the pros. And some of the pros is that in the demand side, it can increase the availability of ecosystem services that are vital for humankind. That's the whole reason that we're trying to do PES. Also, that by making explicit the links between paying for and getting the ecosystem services, it can align users' mind, heart, and pocket. We can make people and society understand how valuable are the ecosystem services and that they need to pay for their provision. And in that way, we can move conservation from the realm of charity towards more the realm of a world paying for what the world wants. And in the demand side, it can bring significant new funds to conservation and sustainable use of the environment. It can make conservation profitable to landowners and land users, hence aligning individual economic incentives with environmental conservation goals. Many of the time, the problem we have is that the land users, landowners, don't get a benefit from protecting the environment. Well, PES is a way to say, well, you're going to benefit, your pocket's going to benefit from protecting the environment. And last but not least, it may become an important source of income for the rural poor. Next, please. But there are cons, of course. There are things working against the PES. There are some there. Conceptually, cons are that there's the issue, who has the right to the environment, because you pay a landowner because you consider that it has a right to the environment, but it may be that that's not the case, that there are regulations and enforcement in place that says, instead of paying you for doing this, we could tax you if you don't do it. there's the issue of paying for doing nothing, meaning in some cases the best way to care for the environment is hands-off. And so what are you paying for there if you're simply saying to the people, don't keep out of that environment? And there are also conservation and social concerns. A lot of local communities, indigenous communities, rural poor may feel that they could lose more having to curtail their access to natural resources that they could win through being providers of ecosystem services. And on the apply side, they are not simple things. They tend to be very complicated and time-consuming to implement. Looking to reviews of 10, 15 years of PES, most private driven schemes, most market-driven schemes are small, and so they deliver little conservation and little money for landowners. And the government-driven schemes are much larger, but there has been a lot of discussion of how effective they have been in terms of conservation and in terms also on benefiting the rural poor. The next, please. Okay, so using PES in REDD, and I go fast here because I'm already taking more of my time. So on the one hand, we could say this is REDD is an ideal situation to take a PES approach because we have a clear ecosystem services, which is reduce emissions from deforestation and degradation. We suppose we have a demand to pay for it, that is the international demand, in the future private demand for REDD. We have potential suppliers, which is the tropical countries, and inside the tropical countries, the forest communities and the land users. And we are developing a powerful tracking mechanism, probably better tracking mechanism than any other ecosystem service has had in the past. Next, please. So where do they make sense? Well, we can discuss this more, but in principle, a PES approach makes sense in landscapes where the drivers of deforestation are small farmers, local communities, indigenous peoples, and so on. Because, for example, there are many cases, Africa is a typical region where the small people are the drivers of deforestation through slash and burn, through collection of fire goods, and also in some other places like in Peru or Amazonian, it's also small farmers, the drivers of deforestation. So there it makes a lot of sense to approach these communities and say, hey, here's a way where doing conservation you can win same or even more than you're winning before. And it could be also that PES approach could make sense in landscapes where peasants, small farmers, local communities, and indigenous populations, and the rural poor, even if they are not important drivers of deforestation, they still can participate or collaborate in some REDD intervention strategies through a PES scheme. For example, if we can reward local communities for managing protected areas or new gazetted protected areas, or if we can reward through PES local community for collaborating in monitoring the forest. So we can bring them into PES schemes even if they are not really the drivers of deforestation, but could be part of the solution. Next, please. And I think this is my last, and sorry for the few more minutes. So where does it not make sense? Well, a PES scheme approach for REDD wouldn't make sense when you are confronted with illegal deforestation. You don't want to reward people that are doing illegal activities. You want to enforce the law. So in a sense, that's a kind of obvious situation. Then a PES scheme may not be enough to address some drivers of deforestation like large, high profitable commercial production like palm oil, soy, large cattle ranching, logging, pulp and paper. And we have been approaching them through other mixed intervention strategies, trying to move them out of the forest, in some cases like palm oil, trying to move it to degraded lands, or engaging them in sustainable roundtables, because in these cases, first, these people are rich and powerful, and the PSP payment for environmental services scheme may be too little money to alter their behavior. So we may need to look to other interventions. And also, it will make sense, it won't make sense on where the drivers of deforestation are concentrated high economic values activities like roads, infrastructure, mining, urban development, because again, those are high value, high impact activities, and there the intervention strategy is more useful, probably are regulation and land use planning, and not PS. And I'll stop here. Thank you for your attention and pass it. I think the next slide is already Josefina with some examples of what's been done in Mexico. Josefina, to you.
Thank you, Pablo. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the experience with Mexico's national PES program. And this program has been working since 2003, so it's becoming 10 years old this year. So the program was designed because Mexico faces both high deforestation and degradation rates and also severe water scarcity. So at the beginning, the PES national program was designed as a program for, it was a national program of payment for hydrological environmental services that was trying to complement other policy responses to face the crisis at the interface of these two problems. So through the PES program, the Mexican federal government pays participating forest owners for the benefits of watershed protection and aquifer recharge in areas where commercial forestry was not currently competitive. So it was important for the government to design a new incentive that could promote forest conservation. So for the program, funding comes from fees charged to water users, from which nearly, well, around $20 million are earmarked for payment for environmental services. So there's been a complete process over these 10 years of adaptive management in the PES program, in which the targeting, the focal areas have been changing and have been adjusted. But in general terms, at the beginning, the applicants were selected according to several criteria related to water scarcity in each region of the country. So in this program, payments are made annually after verification, of course, and documents compliance with the promises and activities that have to occur each year. So that means that the beneficiaries can apply to receive the sources of the program, and then at the beginning they will only receive a benefit for conserving their forests after verification. But as the program evolved, now the beneficiaries have to develop certain activities or best management practices in their territories to make sure that the forest is healthy and that they are promoting activities that create also consciousness in the people of why it's important to take care of the forest and to produce like a behavioral change. So here you can see the main results of the PES program over these 10 years. The program has been covering 3.79 million hectares that are currently under PES. We have 6,714 beneficiaries. The total investment in this decade has been $613 million. So the program is probably the largest PES program in the world right now, and I want to show you some of the lessons from this program. So next, please. Okay, so what are these lessons from PES implementation in Mexico? So as I was telling you, one big lesson was that you have to promote a flexible design and adaptive management in order to change the conditions of the program according to real life. Sometimes you design something and then when you go and implement it in real life, you have to be able to adjust and to be open to changes. So this is what happens at the beginning with the program. The criteria for selection, it was very simple, and the universe of beneficiaries, it was too large because it was too simple, so it was impossible to meet the demand for the resources. So the focalization and the targeting process of the program became more sophisticated with the pass of the years, and there were very clever adjustments to try to target the areas with higher biodiversity presence, like biodiversity hotspots, but also to tackle the areas with higher risks of deforestation or degradation. So this is one important lesson, and it's been very successful in the case of Mexico. The second lesson is that you would want to look at differentiated payments according to the opportunity cost of land uses. And this is because you want to be efficient with your payments, so you need to know that differentiated payments will work in different regions and will help you to actually target the areas with higher risk of deforestation with more effectively, because you will pay more. So people actually will choose the program over the other land use opportunities that they have. And also you won't be paying as much money in places that were not going to be deforesting, experience deforestation in the close timing. So this is also important for you to be efficient in your PES program or scheme. The other good lesson was the multi-annual payments, because it ensures continuity. At the beginning, when the program was in design, it was discussed a lot if the payment should be made for 1 year, for 2 years, or if we needed to call for applications every single year to try to have a different universe every year. At the end, what the program decided is that they will have multi-annual payments for 5 years, with the option of renewing the participation in the program after the 5 years if the community meets certain criteria. So this was also a good lesson, because PES started to create this notion of revenue in the mind of the landowners of the forest, and say that they will have this income for taking care of the forest and conserving the forest for the next 5 years. And they started appreciating the value of the forest. So social capital was built, and they started investing actually the resources from the from the program in the forest, like best management practices, better equipment. I don't know, for example, maybe a car to make rounds to supervise that everything is in place, that there are no fires, etc. So these multi-annual payments were crucial for started building this social capital around forest. Other lesson that was very important in the case of Mexico is the alignment of policies and subsidies among sectors. When the program started, the implementation, sometimes it was competing with agricultural subsidies, and these subsidies are normally higher than what the forest sector can provide. So it was an unfair competition, and then people will opt out for other subsidies instead of for the program. So it is very important that the government try to align policies, especially in critical areas where the policies are not contradicting each other but actually complementing. About the next lesson, productive alternatives. Well, it was very clear that PES was not going to be the panacea for solving every issue, and that conservation should not be conceived as not touching, because at the end of the day, people depend on forests, and livelihoods in the rural areas depend on forests. So you have to just look for productive alternatives that are sustainable and that can complement the payment for ecosystem services, so people can live, actually have better sources of income and diversified sources of income. The other lesson is about payment for results-based actions, and this has to do with additionality. So at the beginning, the program was a little bit criticized because it was payment for not touching, and it was only a subsidy because actually it didn't produce any change in the behavior and the perception of people. So when you tie the payment to actually produce results, people become more active and understand what is the importance of doing certain actions. And it is also important because you actually have to prove that you are making a difference, that you are reducing the rate of deforestation, that the forest is there at the end of the day. So it makes the program more transparent and robust. So the way the Mexican program works is they do satellite verification, but they also do inside verification, and they go and they supervise the activities they are doing according to the agreement the community entered with the government. And they every year they have these rounds of verification. Well, the last lesson is about tailoring features by region or specific area. And this is a very recent lesson. The program has been evolving. In general terms, it's a national program, but right now the Mexican government is seeking for more tailor-made interventions in different regions that are important. And this has to do with different or specific problematics in the regions, in which you have to tailor the payment for ecosystem services accordingly to the circumstances. Probably this area, the opportunity cost of the land is too high. So for that areas, then you will have to pay more for the PES program. Also, the program evolved not only in a watershed view, or not only for water. It is no longer payment for ecosystem services, only for water services. But it also encompasses a range of ecosystem services such as biodiversity protection and agroforestry in some areas. So what I'm going to talk to you next, if we can go to the next slide, is precisely how this notion of PES has evolved into a more regional or landscape level. And here what I'm trying to do is explain how the Mexican government translates PES experience to REDD plus early actions. And we are going to talk about the case of the Selva Lacandona, which is in the state of Chiapas in the south of Mexico. And I chose this case because Chiapas is the most important forest compact land of the country. It's like the lung of Mexico. It has one of the highest net deforestation rates in the country. It is one of the most important natural regions in terms of ecosystem service provision. It is a biodiversity hotspot, and it contributes around 20% of carbon emissions from the LULUCF sector, the land use change and forestry sector. So the next one, please. So in order for me to talk about the case, I wanted to give you an overview of what is the REDD implementation model in Mexico. So what you see here is the way in which the Mexican government is making sense of the national REDD strategy. And this is what is the diagram is just showing that it's a nested approach. And what you see is that the outer circle is the national level, but then you will have subnational regions embedded into the national strategy. And then you will have, for example, some priority regions, and you will tailor interventions at the local level. So this allows you to have consistency at different levels in terms of governance, reference levels, and MRV, and in terms of your financing strategy. And all this model will have to be, is actually under development right now, and it has a huge component, or two very strong pillars. One is the capacity development and communication strategy, and the other pillar is the social and environmental safeguards. So these two pillars sustain the national REDD strategy and promotes that there's better coordination at the government level, at the federal government level, regarding the policies, but also a lot of coordination between levels or within levels, the national, at the state level also, at the municipalities, and with local actors. According to the reference level and the MRV system, you have to also make sure that everything is in consistency. If a region will develop the reference level, we have to make sure that it's methodologically consistent with the national reference level, So everything makes sense overall. So, okay, this is just the implementation model in Mexico for REDD. Can we go to the next, please? Okay, so what is a REDD plus early action? REDD plus early action is a joint effort to address drivers of deforestation and degradation, mainly through the alignment of public policy instruments, in which the idea is to produce alternative and sustainable economic opportunities for communities and forest landowners. It is not a program in the sense that, for example, PES, the PES is a program, it's a national program, but a REDD plus early action is not a program. It's not a program. It's a subnational or jurisdictional initiative that has to be consistent with the national REDD strategy. It is also an initiative that has to engage all relevant stakeholders in the region through a participative platform. And this is a standard requirement from the Mexican government for each REDD early action. And mainly they have been doing this through technical advisory councils in the regions, but also at the national level. There's a technical advisory council at the national level in which everybody that wants to participate, can go listen to the other advances in the national REDD strategy, and can provide inputs for the people involved in the design and in the implementation. So it also has to work through a local technical agent, and this is something that it was learned also with the PES program, and it's that your interventions will work better if you have a local partner. Whenever you have an initiative, if you can have a local partner that helps you in the implementation, it's always going to be more successful because you will have local information and you will actually understand the priorities and the needs at the local level. So all of this, it's been under development in the context of landscape approach and rural development. That means that the main goal is to promote rural development through the integration of different incentives, including PES, but also initiatives from other sectors such as agriculture and social development. And the landscape approach is a very important ingredient because, as I was telling you in the previous slide where I showed you the model of implementation, decisions have to be made according to at the landscape level. It should not be responding to political divisions or administration divisions, but it actually has to make sense at the landscape level. So can we go to the next, please? Okay, so what is the objective of this REDD early action in the Selva Lacandona in Chiapas in Mexico? So the main objectives are to contribute to regional territorial development based on reduction of emissions derived from land use changes. There's a lot of land use changes happening right now in that region of the country. So it's important to address that. Sorry. To increase sustainable primary productivity as a way to keep promoting development in the region, but in a sustainable way, to promote the sustainable use and management of biodiversity and environmental services production, and to build and strengthen community capacities to manage their lands and resources in order to improve livelihoods while preserving their natural ecosystems. So these are the main objectives of this REDD plus early action, and this initiative is under implementation in coordination with the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Rural Development, Fisheries and Food, the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, the National Forest Commission, and the National Commission for Knowledge and Use of Biodiversity through the Mesoamerican Biological Corridor. And this biological Mesoamerican corridor is what we call our technical agent. It's like the agent that is going to help in implementation. It's in the region, it's established there, and it will promote that the actions are actually addressing the local drivers of deforestation. Next, please. Can we go to the next? Yes, thanks. All right, so what are the drivers of deforestation and degradation in the Selva Lacandona, just for you to have an idea of what are the problems that they are facing here. So we have intensive illegal extraction of flora and fauna, since it's one of the largest compact rainforest lands in Mexico. it's very rich in biodiversity, so they have this huge problem of illegal destruction of flora and fauna. They have also a problem of illegal logging, furtive hunting, and illegal fisheries, and of course land use change from rainforest to agriculture and cattle ranching. Next, please. So according to the identification of these drivers, what are the interventions the Red Cross Early Action is promoting in coordination with the Mesoamerican Biological Corridor? These are some of the interventions they do, but actually the Mesoamerican Corridor has been working in a more extensive area, and they have more interventions according to the different dynamics of the region. But in this case, for example, they are trying to conserve natural ecosystems, biodiversity, and environmental services, for example, through the payment for ecosystem services. Sustainable and diversified management of natural resources and productive reconversion, for example, sustainable cattle ranching, sustainable management of wildlife, ecological practices for agriculture. They're trying to restore degraded terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. They are investing a lot of resources in strengthening the capacity of people, organizations, and institutions. They have a big component of knowledge sharing, and they are trying to influence the design and implementation of public policies according to the reality of the region. Next, please. All right, so here it is very important for the REDD model in Mexico to convey this message about conservation and development. So conservation and development are not opposed. They can be achieved if we look for synergies and if we plan interventions according to the real needs of the people in the field. So you can achieve conservation and development if you take into account the whole picture and the landscape approach. And then you can move from a sectorial management that was the business as usual in the rural Mexico to a landscape and integrated planning in which you make sense and you realize that a community or a community land cannot be only forest or cannot be only agriculture. Actually, in order to be to thrive as a community and to have a sustainable livelihood, you have to have a little bit of forest, a little bit of agriculture, and you have to be sustainable. So this is a very important message that the Red Cross Early Actions are trying to convey. The other one is no one-size-fits-all. You have to address the local drivers of deforestation and degradation. The drivers are going to be different from one place to another, so the formula has to change accordingly. You have to be flexible and smart to craft the proper interventions. Well, you have to obviously address complexity through the integration of policies and have vertical and horizontal synergies. The more you coordinate and the more you communicate with other sectors, the better and more efficient you will be in your interventions. And this is also very important because so far all the forest interventions or all the forest initiatives have come from the forest sector to try to save the forest, when actually the drivers of deforestation very often are outside of the forest sector. So you have to be looking for this coordination and this integration of policies, and also the political engagement and political will of other sectors to participate and to coordinate. And well, finally, investing in building the social capital and strengthening capacities to produce community zoning plans has been very important in this case, and it is because you have to make people part of the plan. You have to build social capital, you have to engage people, and you have to show why is it important and what are the advantages of adopting a landscape approach and how can they be involved in these schemes. So next one, please. This is my last slide, and I was just going to show you the main results from the programs, well, from the initiative with the biological Mesoamerican corridor in these past 2 years. So they have invested, as you can see in the figure, the little green dots are all the interventions they have made in the region. The yellow part are the ejidos or communities, and the red polygons are where PES it's an implementation right now. So 66,000 hectares have been paid under the PES scheme, investing around $11.4 million. You can see the other investments in restoration and repopulation around $3.4 million, covering 3,000 hectares. You have community forest development, around 75 actions, costing $422,000. Planning, zoning strategies, and sustainable forest management, you can see the amounts there. So in these 3 years, the total number of hectares that have been integrated in this Red Cross early action are 69,000 hectares, and with a total of 138 actions and an total amount invested of $15 million. So it's been a huge effort. This is one of the 3 Red Cross early actions that the Mexican government has, but it is also probably the most critical one because of the highest rate of deforestation in the Mexican rainforest, in the Lacandona rainforest. So I guess there's a lot of experiences and lessons learned from the PES that allow the Mexican government to move forward with this more integrated approach, in which PES is only one of the tools that are going to be used for producing this change and to promote rural development in the field. Yeah, and with that I will finish because we don't have a lot of time for questions. Oh, okay, well, just mention to you that there are some sources and references listed here in the presentation, so you can go and consult to get more information. There are some institutions that you can go to their websites and get publications, and you can also do some web searches. Here there are 2 examples of publications that you may want to review. The lessons learned from REDD from PES and conservation incentive programs. This is a publication from the Costa Rica, Mexico, and Ecuadorian government. And there is this other book, the Payment for Environmental Services, Forest Conservation and Climate Change, where you will find also experiences of other countries, particularly Latin America. Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Josefina and Pablo, for your presentation. This is Maria Jose Pacha here. And now is the time for the questions. During the session, some of you have written questions in the panel on the right, and I will give the floor to these participants. I will read the questions, and if there is any clarification, I would appreciate if you can jump in. So the first person that has asked something is Daniela Carrion. Hi, Daniela. I think that the questions are for Pablo. Whether you can explain a little bit more about the reverse options case as a way to determine the price of ecosystem services. Pablo, back to you.
Yeah, sure. The idea, and Josefina mentioned in the case of Mexico, is that different communities, different local land users may face different costs to provide ecosystem services. So in several places, in developed countries like Australia that have a huge program for water savings through reverse auction, but also developing countries like Bolivia and Peru, this process has been used of reverse auction. How it works, for example, last year they did a very interesting case in the Lago Titicaca, which is in northern Bolivia, southern Peru. It's a high lands, very, very poor communities, all indigenous communities. And the goal of the PES scheme was to protect biodiversity, genetic biodiversity. In this case was the quinoa. The quinoa is a cereal from high altitudes in the Andean region. And because and there are like 20 different varieties, but they are disappearing fast because the market favor one or two, and so they this program approached a dozen communities, a dozen different indigenous peasant communities, offering them, asking them how much money would you ask to plant X hectares of these 3 varieties or 4 varieties, which are less market appreciated. So individually, the peasants won't do it because they don't get good prices for that. But with the additional payment from the PES scheme, they will do it. The funny thing is that, so this is the asking, reverse auction, meaning each group, in this case it wasn't each individual, but it was each community will present an offer saying, we will do this, we will put aside this amount of hectares to plant these genetic varieties, and we want this money. Funny thing is that these are very isolated communities of, from the same ethnical group, but they came with very different prices because the micro conditions, the local conditions even vary 1 kilometer or yeah, 1 kilometer distance. So a reverse auction is simply put a program and say we want to pay for this ecosystem service. Tell us how much money you want per ton, per hectare, per whatever. And the experience is that very different prices come through. The drawback is that sometimes communities resent after that some people is paying more and some people is paying less. Okay, that's it.
Well, thank you, Pablo. Well, there are a lot of questions in the queue, so I will try to select some of them, and the other ones will be answered in the email. So, thank you, Daniela. We have 2 more questions from you, but we are going to answer them by email, as I said before. So, André Diaz from Brazil has asked, I understand PES scheme is not a silver bullet that will alone make standing forests more valuable than others' land use. What are the main challenges to promote an integrated forest economy, including goods and services? And this will include sustainable forest management, payments for ecosystem services, and REDD.
Josefina, do you want to try that one?
Of course, I can answer that, Pablo. Thank you. Hi, Andre. It's good to hear from you. Well, I guess the main challenge in the case of Mexico, at least that I'm more familiarized with, it's how you change the inners of just walking or like just driving actions from specific goals. Like in the case when you have a program and you have a manager of a program, you have very clear your goals, right? So you need to achieve your goals and you don't care about what is the other manager doing and the other program what it has to do. So how you break these inners and how you actually make people to start talking to each other and how to make sense of this more integrated approach at the landscape level and start like you move away from a sectorial management in which you only care from your own goals, and how can you like transition to this more integral approach? I guess it has been in the case of Mexico a huge investment of time in getting the people to sit together to talk and to promote, for example, common criteria for the selection of areas, or looking at the landscape level, where are your programs working, where are my programs working, and how can we make it more efficient, and how can you look for synergies? But this is a lot of capacity building inside an institution, like the institutional level, but also outside, and how you communicate with people about the advantages of working together. And sometimes, for example, in the specific case of adaptation, which is a little bit different, there are a lot of things going on already that will complement or that serve multiple purposes, but people don't know, and you have to make it explicit. So I guess, I mean, it is a challenge of communication and to share with the others and to be able to be open to listen what other people is doing and how you can contribute. I hope this is useful.
Well, thank you, Josefina. I think that I would appreciate if we can try to keep the answers short as well, because we are already in the limit of our time in the webinar, and we have a lot of questions. I will try to choose the most relevant ones. We have Ana Fajardo here, and she says, as Pablo Gutman said, the most rural property in the Andes are small scale. So how do you implement a REDD project if the cost of implementing is very high?
Okay, Pablo here. Actually, it not need very high. There are very good experiences that it costs a little, and the cost can be borne by the public sector. So we are able to pass the incentives to the small farmers, peasants, and bear the cost in the public sector. And more in email, she wants.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pablo. Lloyd is asking a question here. He's interested in the scale at which PES agreements are reached with landowners. Is it typically individual landowners or whole communities, and does verification then happen at level of individual land holdings or more broadly?
Josefina?
I think that Josefina.
Well, very quickly, just in the, yes, sure. Yeah, well, in the case, in many cases, yeah, the contracts are made with each individual community, and the verification and the monitoring is also done in each community through satellite imaging. So you have to have a good resolution imaging, and then you will have a sample of which places are you going to visit each year. So you don't have to visit every single place each year because you have a lot of contracts under implementation. But you can have a representative sample and go. But we can discuss more.
And I think that also depends very much on the land tenure of the area. If in Mexico there is a lot of community forest, but in other areas of the world there are more private landowners. Great.
That's true. That's true. Costa Rica, it's all individual owner. Mexico, some programs are at the level of the ejido, the community, different.
But also they have the private landowners in the program, and they are also being supervised, and the contract is made with the private landowner.
Okay, well, thank you. Here Raymond is reflecting that Pablo said that when the cause of deforestation are things like cattle ranching and illegal logging, PES may not make sense. However, these were drivers in the Selva Lacandona case, and yet PES was a big part. Can we clarify, please?
Sure. I mean, every single situation is different. In the case of in one area, you probably have all many drivers of deforestation working together. In some cases, PES will work. In others, it won't work. If you have illegal deforestation, probably the right way to go is to enforce the law, not to say to the delinquent, we're going to pay you for stopping doing an illegal thing. But at the side from the large or clearly illegal activities that you want to stop, there may be poor rural people taking wood for firewood, and you need to strike another deal with them, because even if this is illegal, it could be that from the point of view of equity, you cannot simply forbid that activity. So you try to do some sustainable production practice with them, and then you will have farmers that can abide for a PES. My point is that PES will make sense sometimes where there is a real reason to pay the land user, and when the payment you can offer is good enough to change the activity. In some cases that happen, in some cases it doesn't happen, and you need to go other way. But you need to find it in the case.
Yeah, and also to complement, I mean, it's precisely in the Lacandona rainforest, PES is not the only intervention, right? So it has to be a mix of interventions that make sense and that overall, altogether, produce a behavioral change. But I completely agree with Pablo in that you cannot pay to abide the law. I mean, you cannot pay people that are committing illegal activities to stop cutting the forest. That's something that you cannot do with PES.
Okay, well, thank you. We have a question by Catherine Michi here. Well, she said a great presentation, and she is wondering whether you have any advice for establishing new PES schemes when a company or industry has traditionally been accessing the relevant ecosystem services without having to pay in the past.
Okay, there has been several success in the WWF approaching companies and making them aware of the that they need to pay, and we have approached them saying, guys, if you want to be here for the long range, you need to improve the treatment of ecosystem service that is part of your business. You are not paying now. You can go without not paying for some years, but then the ecosystem service will disappear. And sometimes it has worked. It has worked with water services, for example, particularly with companies like soft drink or bottlers that do understand that having a long-term supply of water is important. So sometimes it has worked, sometimes it has not worked. Again, it's a one-by-one process, and that's part of the cost of doing PES on a voluntary basis.
Right.
And also probably another suggestion would be to explore an approach in which there's a matching fund in which the government can involve the company and work together in like having a matching fund in which both they have to start contributing for the ecosystem services, and then gradually transitioning to a demand supply scheme. But the matching funds have been very useful in different places.
Okay, well, thank you, Josefina. We have an interesting question by Abner, and he wants to know, how do you benefit indigenous community with poverty alleviation through REDD? If they are enforced by law to conserve the land, how do you remunerate them? What are the improvements on the REDD scheme that would be effective to tackle poverty besides preservation? And maybe Josefina can give an example from Mexico.
Sure. And in specific case of the Selva Lacandona, all the interventions that have been under implementation in the area include the local communities and indigenous peoples. And for example, one important feature that the program has is that they involve the communities. They actually go with the communities and produce the land use planning or zoning of their own community, and they involve them in what interventions they want to implement in the community. So they use the tools available for the Red Cross Early Action and with the Mesoamerican Biological Corridor and apply them accordingly to what the needs of the community are. So they will have income not only for PES, but also from all the other programs that I show you in the slide. And for example, the community forestry program is also being implemented there. And they have, they build capacities, for example, for women to be able to have sustainable management of resources, non-timber forest products, for example, flowers or other products that they can produce woods to sell. So they have many benefits. It's not only cash benefits, but they have a different mix of other benefits that are directly getting into their own hands, including PES. PES payments are strictly for the landowners, meaning a community or a private landowner, and they have their own benefit sharing arrangements that they set themselves. But I can provide more information in the email too.
Okay, well, thank you. And the last question that we're going to have here is from Cesar Galarza. He wants to know if it's useful to combine type of environmental services, water, carbon, biodiversity, etc., to get more payments from buyers.
Yeah, sure. Well, ideally you need to find a way where you don't play one ecosystem services against the other. No? So that's a risk of this unbundling of the ecosystem services. Selling only carbon sequestration could be dangerous because maybe reforestation with single rapidly growing species they do more carbon sequestration than pristine forests. So that's a concern. How to package, how to bundle the ecosystem services in a way that maximize benefit for the environment, benefit for the local communities, and don't play one against the other. To some extent, this has been happening because even if the demand is for one ecosystem service only, like water or conservation, many times the way to provide that water conservation is through a healthy ecosystem. So it can naturally happen, no? But in some other cases there has been conflicts between one service and the other, between water and biodiversity, things like that. And again, there's no single solution. There's an important issue to keep in mind and work through.
Okay, well, thank you, Pablo. That's very comprehensive. So I think that we are going to answer the rest of the questions by email. So please be in touch and be aware of this. Thank you very much for your time. And remember that if you want to contact us, we have several resources where you can look at, like our website, our newsletter, and also registering for future webinars. So thank you very much to everybody. I don't know, Breen, you want to say something? Pablo, Josefina?
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks to all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.